This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
A lady that's true, near and dear to my heart, Melvina, better known as Mel, Kleverova Zilliox. She is the head welfarist at Melvina's Cat Ranch. She is a specialist in so many different words on behavior training when it comes to your little felines and modification, helping so many. She's fantastic. You know, she's been talking to us the past few weeks, and we're ecstatic she's back with us, helping so many with their feline needs. How are you, sweetheart?
I am fantastic. Thank you. And I've got Sarita here. She's been on a couple of different shows, but she's here again, hopefully to show us some positive reinforcement training.
I love you. Hi, beautiful. Yes, that's a topic for today. And before we get started with that, we're going to talk about behavior modifications, bonding, and this positive reinforcement. Just for the first timers listening today, Melvina, tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do.
Yeah. So I joined the animal welfare world about 10 years ago after a very great career in corporate America, working for some of the best brands on earth. But I found that I needed more animals in my life. So I became a veterinary assistant and then a feline behaviorist and accredited through the IAABC. And that work led me to start my PhD in anthrozoology, which is the study of human-animal relations. So it goes through psychology, biology, and animal science for us to better understand how our animals communicate to us and how we can enrich their lives so that we can both be happy and healthy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So let's get started. You mentioned that
Yeah.
kitties really experience the world differently than humans. So would you mind just diving into that?
Yeah, definitely. So we know from, the studies that we've done and some of our other podcasts that kitties have a very different sensory perception than we do. And so the more that we can understand how they do experience the world, the better that we can be with helping them cope with stressful situations or even just do training that is going to be life enhancing for them, like carrier training so that they're not as freaked out when they go to the vet or training to take medicines through cooperative care. And one of the things that we do is we think about their emotional response. So if there's a negative emotional response, we want to try and have them get a positive emotional response. And so what we can do, it's a process called desensitization and counter conditioning. And what that means is the desensitization part is gradually exposing them to some kind of trigger stressor that is not great, but that we do it very gently and gradually and systematically so that it's only a little bit scary, and we use the counter conditioning part to wrap that experience with positive reinforcement. So we find rewards for them that make that scary situation not so bad, and they can start to cope better with stress, anxiety, and fear.
Beautiful. All right. So how do we find out these motivators? What's happening to our kittens? How do you figure this all out?
Yeah. So, through a lot of different research and working with really thousands of kitties at this point, one of the things that I like to have my clients do is really kind of think about all of the different rewards that could be beneficial for a kitty. So this is what I call the toolbox. And
Mm-hmm.
and we can think about that toolbox in four different areas that might be stimulating or rewarding for our kitties. And the first one is, we've talked about this before, but food and treats. So as Sarita is demonstrating here, she loves her squeeze up treat. So this would probably be something for her that would be, a very high value reward because she will really come, running from anywhere in the house to get this thing. This is, affectionately called kitty crack, and it is a very good motivator for cats. So food and treats, when you think about food and treats, some people are like, oh, my cat's not really motivated by treats. Well, think about the different forms that treats can have. So they could be wet treats like these come in tubes, or it could be crunchy, or it could be freeze dried.
And
And
what are
then,
those called again? I mean, I don't know if you want to promote a brand
yeah,
or not, but what is
yeah.
it? What is it? Because I'm curious for my
So
cats.
So these are called delectables, and
Delectables. Yep.
they're they're squeeze ups. They come out of this tube, this really convenient package. She's off camera, but she's actually using her hand to tell me, "Hey, mom, I need more."
Uh-huh. Aw.
And so these are great. There's many different brands of these too. Churu, Tiki Sticks, there's a bunch of these. So if you just go and, do an internet search for tube treat or wet treat, you'll get, a bunch of different ones, and they come in different flavors. And that's the other thing to think about with food and treats is that, your cat might be more of a sea flavor kind of kitty that likes fish and shrimp and scallops and tuna. Or your kitty might be more of a land flavor kitty where they like chicken and turkey and duck and beef. And so it's important to know what those textures are. So if they like wet, crunchy, freeze dried, or if they like different flavors. And then that can start to populate that first area of the toolbox. So food and treats, is going to work for like 80% of cats, but you will get some kitties that are not very food motivated. And that's okay too, because we've got 3 other areas that we can
Oh,
look at to see what we could offer in rewards. So the next one is one of the ones that we've talked about before, but it's one of my favorite areas for kitties that is enriching is play, because play for kitties is actually them hunting, and they go through all the motions of hunting. Sarita really wants the rest of this.
so cute.
And and so they actually go through their natural behaviors of stalking, pouncing, and then what we can do in a play session is actually let them end with a yummy treat or a meal. So it really does make them feel satisfied that they got a successful hunt. So we do that by, going through our motions and play, and then just offering them a treat at the end. And
I love it.
so
I do the wand toy one, but that's my favorite. But there's other ones you'll explain,
yeah,
right?
yeah, 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 yeah. And so, there's many different toys that you can get. There's self-play toys, but I love the ones that are actually human and cat interactive because it gives
Mhm.
you time to bond with your kitty. And it's also good physical exercise for you too. So for them, they get to do cognitive exercise, physical exercise. But like you said, the wand toys, those are some of the best ones. Kitties love to chase things, fuzzy mice, balls, kickers, catnip toys, interactive toys like motion activated toys where you could leave that on for a kitty if you're leaving and, they might have some separation anxiety, turn a toy on for them. So they're focused on that. So play can really be something that is very enriching for our kitties. So there's many different areas that you can investigate to find the perfect toys. And, some of the things that I tell folks too, just about play in general is try and do a routine. So if you can do an AM session and a PM session of play, then that gives your cat something to look forward to. And we know that, a lot of anxiety is caused by fear of the unknown. So if they have something that they can look forward to, then they have less fear of the unknown. And because cats are both predator and prey, they have, their brains hardwired for, oh, I have to hide and not get eaten, and I have to go look for my own lunch so I can eat. So they
Yeah.
have this, their brain is kind of working in these 2 areas. And so the less that they have that is unexpected and the more that they have that is routine, the safer that they'll feel too. So, those are just some tips to use when you do play with your kitties. But that's, another big area that we can use as rewards.
Got it.
And then the third area is one of my favorites because it's attention and training. So attention, meaning if your kitty is really motivated by getting, chin pets or ear scratches or just cuddling, lap time, all that sorts of stuff. Attention from humans is actually really motivating for a certain number of our kitties. But there are cats that, are definitely more aloof and they don't need to spend as much time with us in physical contact, but they might be entertained by training. So with training, there's, those life trainings that we can do that we talked about, like carrier training, get a cat really used to the carrier so that, car rides and vet visits are not terrible.
Mm.
And then there's the fun training where, if your cat is very active and very intelligent, cats actually really do take very well to training. And there's a lot of people that are like, Mel, you're crazy. Like cats do not follow directions and they just do their own thing. Well, the key to cat training is making sure that you know what their highest value rewards are because you can entice them to engage. But then you
Hmm.
also really have to worry about what their mental state is. So if they seem like they don't want to engage, then it's not a good time to train. So kind of watch their behaviors and when, they want to engage, then it's time to train. So that's a really important part. And training sessions really don't have to be that long. They can be, a couple minutes and, people are like, well, that actually work. And those reinforcers really do work in a short amount of time. So don't feel like, if you only got a training session that was, 2 or 3 minutes, that was, some kind of failure because that's actually a really good training session for a kitty. And it's better to stay in that positive zone where they're interested, they're motivated. And one of the things that happens when we train kitties, when we do it, as a one-on-one thing, is we do bond. And so, when they get these rewards, it's a neurological process where oxytocin is released and these feel good chemicals are happening and they're going to start associating that yummy treat, the fun playtime, the attention, all of these things that they're getting during training, they're going to associate that with you. And so because they got all these really great feelings, those feelings are going to transfer to you as well. So it's a wonderful way to bond with your kitties.
Oh
And
my goodness.
and I was trying to see if Sarita would do one of her favorite tricks, which is she likes to do the meerkat. So the meerkat is where you just get them to sit very gently on their back legs, and she's just like out of camera here. Let's see if we can get her. Sarita, you do it.
Aw.
You do it. Yeah, go. Good girl, honey.
Oh my goodness, how cute.
Yeah. And she's still learning. So she does a little bit of that grabby. She's using her hands, which, we don't want her to do that, but I'm still going to reward her for, doing part of the action. And so that's what we call shaping. And we can shape those behaviors as she gets better at it. And so she's, probably, I'd say medium, she does it about 50% of the time. But you know what? In this beginning part, I'm going to reward her every single time, even if she doesn't do it 100% right, because that's shaping that behavior that will then encourage her to do it more and to do it in the right way. So she's a student at the moment.
Oh my goodness, adorable. So cute. It's amazing. How many do you have now, by the way, for people that don't know?
Yeah, well, I do foster and rescue, so my population is kind of constantly changing. But I do have my two here. So this is Rania, my little orange girl, who she's a 20%er. So only 1 out of 5 orange tabbies is a female. So she's one of the rare ones. But she's also a very good trainee. So she's she's actually just more interested in having a snack right now, which is okay too.
Oh my goodness. All right, what else is on the list?
Yeah. And so then the final area that you can think about in terms of reward is sensory stimulation. And we've talked about this on past podcasts, but thinking about a cat's senses and what would be rewarding for them that, maybe they do like treats or maybe they don't, but having other options that you can put in this toolbox to be able to reward them. So one of the big ones is a cat's sense of smell. So we think catnip and silver vine and all those things that could be a sensory stimulation. I personally like to bring in sticks and leaves and acorns and pine cones and things from the outside as well, because they're just interesting smells and textures. So they can be really wonderful sensory stimulation. You could do a training session and at the end you give them, a box of clean topsoil with a couple of acorns thrown in there and they can kind of, nose around. It's like nose work for cats. So things like that are very, very good for kitties that might not be as motivated for other things or just be another reward that you can add for your toolbox.
Got it. Amazing. I love this. I love this. Let's add on more stuff. What else can we do with our training and our
Yeah.
options and our stimulation? And yeah, we have a lot
Yeah.
to keep going over. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. And so once we think about all those four areas, I have a little sheet that I give my clients and, it's got little check boxes and you can check, the areas that have the highest value rewards for each of your kitty. And remembering that each kitty is an individual. So you might have one cat that's really into catnip and another cat that really could not care less. And so, building that toolbox for each individual kitty is really important. And then once say the couple of things from every area, or sometimes I've had kitties that have only had rewards in one area, like food, food, food. But there's, a bunch of different kinds of food within that they like. But what we do then is we create a ladder of the
Mm-hmm.
highest value rewards to the not so high value rewards. So we know that, like these delectables, these are something that, both Rania and Sarita really love. I would probably put these at the top for each of them. They also really do like churros, so I think they're kind of agnostic with a tube treat. So if I have a tube treat at the top of the ladder, I know, exactly what to do when it's time to start training
Yeah.
or do a desensitization and counter conditioning session with the kitty when I know it might be stressful. So
Oh
with
my
those
goodness.
stressors that we're introducing to them, we want to make sure that we give them something really wonderful so that they can get over that fear, anxiety, or stress in that moment. So that'll be the top. And then we just rank the rest of the things that we have identified within those four areas to fill out the rest of that ladder. And then that way you can also in a training session be able to kind of switch quickly if needed. So I have had some kitties that have just gotten kind of, over a treat. They won't take a treat anymore during a session, but they might go chase a fuzzy mouse that I throw to them. Or, they might get, some kind of catnip that I can, go hide a pinch of it, around for them to find. So it's more thinking that, all of these things really make up this toolbox and then the ladder ranks them. And so it's an easy way for folks to really understand, that kitties have many different things that they could find as rewards. And then there's lots of different ways that we can use them to be able to keep them engaged during training.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And how long does it take to train a cat though, like this, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, typically some of the easier things, like if you want to teach your kitty how to do a high five, or do the meerkat like we were doing with Sarita, those things typically take just a couple sessions. They
Okay.
learn them very easily. They're just easy physical things that they can do. Now, for something like carrier training, or I do cooperative care, which is teaching kitties how to take medicines so that you're not, forcing them, to take a pill, those kind of things. It gets them to engage in a way where they get to choose. And those sessions are usually a little bit longer. Those will take sometimes weeks or, a month or so to be able to get a kitty really acclimated to the behaviors that are going to make, their lives happier and better.
Got it. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for that. And this is
Yeah.
awesome. So we have our all tools in place. Now you say it's time to like build this ladder, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, how do we do it?
Yeah. And so, what I always remind folks is that, it's easy to kind of make blanket statements, but especially with building a ladder, really think about the individual kitty, because I work with a lot of multi-cat households. And so we'll build a ladder for each one as an individual because they're going to have slightly different preferences. There will be some things that will be, fairly universal, like, our delectables. But, there's definitely preferences that everybody has, just like us. There's going to be days too that, maybe the delectable is my favorite on one day, but you know what? Maybe it's not on another day when I've already had, breakfast. I'm not quite as hungry, but I'm ready to play instead of eat a yummy snack. So building that ladder, always think of the individual. And then there can be some resistance. So, sometimes if a cat is feeling too stressed or if they're, still associating negative experiences, the best way to overcome that is really to watch their behaviors and be patient with them. So if it's not a good time to train, it is a-okay to stop and just take a break and come back in a little while or maybe even the next day. So, just letting the cat choose to
Yeah.
be part of that training is such a huge piece of the puzzle that, a lot of folks, they get frustrated because they're like, it's not working. It's like, it's okay. Just, try a slightly different time, or sometimes even changing areas. Maybe it's a better area, or maybe that you are on the floor and they're a
Hmm.
kitty that likes to be, on top of a counter or a tower. Think about all the things that could be different that you do to help give them just a little bit more of a choice in what's happening, and then you'll get really positive results from that.
Got it. Oh my goodness. Well, it's funny. My little thing is my cat, I don't know if your cat's like this, isn't normal. I have one cat, I think, trained the other cats, now the kittens and stuff, to come drink out of the faucet. They love when I put the faucet
Yes.
on, they lick, and so now the other ones have learned.
Yes.
And like then my
Yes.
cats also hold toys in their mouth like dogs. And I never had a cat
Yeah.
that did that, but now all the cats are living together. They're all picking up stuff with their mouth.
Yeah.
Can they train
Yes.
themselves?
Yes, yeah, that is actually something that we look at a lot in multi-cat households, because cats are social learners, especially the younger ones. So, they will watch their conspecifics, the other ones in their species, and they will see them do things, and they'll be like, hey, they got a treat for that, or they had fun doing that, and they will do the same thing. So those behaviors are absolutely replicable between kitties in the same household, because they do learn from each other. So that's a great observation.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so cute. And
Yeah,
one
it
just
is
walked
very
in
cute.
now. Pebbles, come here. Pebbles looks like a raccoon. It's so big and fluffy. All right, so if he
Oh,
comes over, I'll grab him. What else were we talking about today? Let's continue. There's
yeah,
still so much
yeah.
more. Where do we leave off? Hold on, I lost my notes. Where are we?
Yeah, no, 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 it's okay. Yeah, just about, some of the potential roadblocks that we could have, and really, the key takeaways that I would really tell, and I do tell all my folks, is, just remember that consistency and patience are really your best friends during training, because, the more that we can set kitties up with a routine, the less fear of the unknown they're going to have, and the more they're going to look forward to things that we're doing with them. So, consistency, patience, remember the individual, positive reinforcement can be really effective as long as we are thinking about, all of the things that, the kitties as an individual, might want to see. So those are just some of the things that, as we do think about, what's going on in our kitties world, how we can just do this in a way that gives them choice, or what we call agency, and let them really experience this in a fun and interactive way.
Got it. Well, oh my goodness. What are some of these roadblocks that can happen though with the animals? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, how does it, not everyone's gonna really adjust well, right?
Right, right. And that's where, we've talked in different podcasts about being able to
Mm-hmm.
read a kitty's, behaviors, body language, facial expressions, tail expressions. If you see that, your cat's getting frustrated, it's okay to stop. There's no rule that, training has to happen on any given day, or that it has to happen at a certain time. If, you're trying to keep to a schedule and that particular time just isn't right for the kitty, take a
Yeah.
break. Take a break, go do something else, try again in the evening, do a bunch of different things that just make it better for them. But do try and see, is it because, there was a loud truck that just, drove by and they got spooked by a loud noise? Try and be aware of what's happening in the environment. And then that way you can try and stop those things from happening during training, so that they're not, associating something that might be fearful or stressful with a training session. And then on the human side, it can be frustrating because, you might not think that somebody is learning fast enough, or are they even getting it? Like, are all my efforts in vain? It can be frustrating on the human side too. So I like to tell folks that, it's a marathon, not a sprint. These are things that do take, a couple of sessions for some of the easier things, but then certainly, for some of the more intense training, like harness training, I do a lot of harness training for kitties. That's definitely, a multi-session thing. So don't be frustrated. If it starts to feel frustrating for you, then what are your coping mechanisms? Can you go have, a fun, fruity, fizzy drink and give yourself a break, or just take a walk in the sunshine, soak up some rays? What are some things that you can do as self-care to feel not frustrated in that moment too, and then come back, when you're feeling better? But those are some of the things that can be disheartening for folks when, they start to try and do training and just feel, kind of lost. And, you can always contact a behaviorist to help guide you. I do a lot of guided trainings as well, so that, folks that might not be, experts or have a lot of experience can get the expert guidance that they need.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And you said, remember the individual, right? Watch for progress and
Yeah.
adjust routines. Combine tools in your toolbox for a multifaceted
Yes.
approach to rewards. And now you're working with people this way, virtually, right? On these things. Can we sit here? Can I bring my cats on? Can we do the
Yeah.
behavior modification right like this? And it
Yeah.
works.
Absolutely. Yeah. The pandemic did a lot of bad stuff, but it did open us up to doing virtual meetings. And so I do a lot of my work virtually. And so, we'll just kind of make the camera angles bigger so that, we can see more and do training sessions right on video.
Beautifully said. All right. We still got 3 more minutes left in the show. I don't want to cut you short. So how do we want to kind of wrap it up for the day?
Yeah. Well, just kind of thinking through, training for kitties, it isn't for everybody. If you've got a kitty that, maybe is older or, has some arthritis or things like that, maybe that time is better spent doing things like finding rewards for them. So, going through those 4 areas that we talked about and finding the things that are most rewarding for the kitty, but just doing that as just extra enrichment. So, I do get, a lot of senior kitties that might have some behavioral issues that we'll work through, and we'll do behavior modification, but we won't necessarily do, some of the training like Sarita was showing us with, things like the meerkat and, high five. So, that's again, kind of considering the individual. And then, just to remember that, even though you have that ladder where what the highest value reward is, there are definitely many different things that, your kitties could potentially be rewarded by. And so to combine those things as you do a training session is really a wonderful way to get, many different facets of reward going for your kitties. So, that their food is the biggest reward, but that play and catnip are numbers 2 and 3. So have all those things ready in a training session so that, also your kitty doesn't get bored, because if they do, they're like, I've had my treats, I don't really, I'm done. I don't really need anything else, but I will go chase, a fuzzy mouse, or I will go, chew on a silver vine stick or do other things. You can have all those things ready so that, your kitty is stimulated for the whole session.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And the love for all living creatures, you say, is the most notable attribute of man. Is that your quote?
No, I wish that was
Darwin?
yeah, I
Yes.
know. Yeah, one of my favorite people that has ever graced this earth is Charles Darwin,
Hmm.
and all the work that he did to really understand different species. And, I just found that quote so moving because, if we give ourselves the opportunity
Yeah,
to understand and to learn about different creatures other than ourselves, it really is a wonderful relationship that we can build with not just kitties, but animals all around the world.
beautiful. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you here, Mel. How do we contact you?
Yeah, so the easiest way to get a hold of me is through my website, so melvinascatranch.com, and there's a web form so you can tell me all of the issues or concerns that you're having with your kitties, and I will get back to you right away, and we will build an action plan so that we can have happy, healthy kitties out there in happy homes.
Thank you so much. You have a fantastic day. And to all of our listeners, stay tuned. We'll be back with more. Enjoy the kitties.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.